Thank you so much for coming. Getting towards the last couple of talks on the second day. You guys are real endurance athletes. I appreciate you coming. If you're here, I assume it's because you care about accessibility, which is awesome. You should care about accessibility. Who was able to go to Manuela's talk yesterday? Okay, awesome. If you weren't able to go and you're into accessibility, I highly recommend you wait for that video to come out and check it out. She talks about more of the basics side of things that I'm not going to cover today. I'm going to highlight just a couple of things, but there are some good nuggets in her presentation too, so please go check that out. So my name's Rona Kilmer. I've been building web and mobile apps for about 20 years, a little over 20 years. And recently I fell down the accessibility rabbit hole hardcore when my company, Ardley, asked me to ensure that our web application was accessible. And the point of today's talk is to go into the differences that come with building an accessible app on the web, specifically with Flutter. There are things that are there's some big gotchas that are going to get you if you're coming from the mobile side and building in Flutter. So we're going to talk about what those unique things are. We're going to go over some of the debugging tools that can help with the web specifically. I'm going to give you a couple of quick tips that I stumbled upon while I was on this journey. And we're going to talk about some specific challenges and some solutions. Unfortunately, I don't have solutions for all of the problems that I ran into. Luckily, Flutter knows all about those issues, and they're on it. So my goal is that this time next year, or heck, in the next 2 months, that part of my talk is going to be totally useless because they've solved the problem. So let's all just cross our fingers for that. So when you want to build an accessible web application, where do you start? You need to make sure that it handles text scaling. If somebody has their font set to a really large size, you need to handle that. You need to make sure that tap sizes, the targets on your tappable items, are large enough for people with mobility issues to handle tapping them. You need to make sure that your color choices have sufficient contrast for people with vision impairments. You also need to make sure that you're not signifying anything important with color that isn't backed up with more information for people who are not distinguishing different colors. You need to make sure it works with a keyboard. You need to make sure it works with a screen reader. That's all I'm going to say about the first 4 items, because all of that stuff is well documented, and there's not much difference between building for the web versus building for mobile. Most of the issues I ran into came with supporting screen readers and some side effects for sighted users because of the screen readers. First, we're going to talk about developer tools. One of the first things you can do is just scan your site and see what kind of issues are going to come up. So I built a super simple app, 2 text fields, a button. These are material widgets. I did nothing fancy. And you can go into Chrome DevTools, and I should take a moment to point out that most of our development happens in a Mac OS build because we want the hot reload. But when it comes to accessibility, you're going to have to do your testing in Chrome if you want to support web. There's no way around it. So here we are in Chrome. We've got our DevTools. You can head on over to this Lighthouse tool, and you can run a report. What we care about is accessibility, so that's the only thing I selected. And you hit Analyze Page Load, and you're going to get something that looks like this. This is a super simple app. I'm getting an 88%. Not acceptable. What has gone wrong? They tell you down below what has gone wrong. So we're just going to take a look at these 2 things. One of them we can fix, and one of them we can't fix. The first one is the viewport meta. It's complaining because either the meta has specified that it's not scalable, or the maximum scale is less than 5. I don't know about you, but when I built my Flutter web app, I didn't pay any attention to a viewport meta. So we're going to have to go check out our index.html and see what's going on there. And first, I'll show you real quick the last thing they mention here is that the HTML element does not have a lang attribute. So 2 things need to get addressed in our index.html. So I'm going to shift over to my demo. We're going to get to that later. And I'm going to show you to fix the HTML element, the second item, I just put the lang attribute up here. Super easy. Unfortunately, if you're supporting localization or internationalization in your app and you set the locale on your material app, it has no effect on this. It doesn't add it, doesn't do anything. So you're going to have to manually add it, and then I'm not sure what happens if you support more than one language. If you have selected multiple locale, I'm not sure how you're going to deal with this. I would suggest setting a default and then letting Flutter handle all of the internationalization. It'll get you around the scanners. You'll pass the test for the lang attribute. Okay, the second item, if you recall, was the viewport meta. Who knows what the viewport meta is? Has anybody ever heard of it? Okay. If you've built for web before, prior to Flutter times, the viewport meta was introduced back when responsive websites were introduced, or at least that's when it was widely supported. So back in the day when we first started getting smartphones, if you recall, you would pull up a website and it would be this teeny tiny little shrunk down version of the website, and you would have to pinch and zoom and scroll around to see what you wanted to do. They were totally unusable. The viewport meta came along to inform browsers that, hey, this site is responsive, you don't need to do that anymore, I'll handle it, I've got the breakpoint set, like, we're good. So, I have added the viewport meta, and actually I need to show you here in the index.html. You can see that I added the viewport meta here. This is just your typical, like, out of the box, if you were like, I'm going to go build a responsive website, this is what you would put in your index.html. And then I changed it to user scalable yes, because if you recall, one of the things it was complaining about was that user scalable was equal to no. They want you for it to be an accessible site. They want to know that you are supporting the pinch and zoom and allowing people to navigate that way. So I threw that in, and then I built my site. And you're going to have to bear with me on the scripts here. This is in debug mode, so this has not been minimized. Thank you. So all the way down here, down, good grief, I don't remember it being this long. We're going to see that you can see that the note that I put in index.html, Flutter overwrites this. Viewport meta is nowhere to be found. It is down, actually it is to be found, it is down here. So Flutter has ripped out what I put in and replaced it with its own viewport meta and set user scalable back to no. So you have no control over the viewport meta tag. There is an open issue about this. Until this gets sorted, I'm not entirely sure how they're going to sort it, but until it gets sorted, you're never going to get that check mark next to that criteria in any tool that scans your site. You can still support pinch and zoom, though, with interactive viewer. So you can let Flutter handle it. It's just that those scanners are not going to know that you support it. Okay, and actually, we saw that I fixed the lang attribute, so we'll go back to Lighthouse, and I'm just gonna, to make it faster, I'm just gonna run it real quick. Just select desktop. And this will show you what our new score is gonna be since I updated the index.html. We get a 93, at least that's an A. It's green, I'll take it. Okay, semantics debugger, this is what you're going to encounter as soon as you start looking at docs about how to work with semantics. Basically, you add show semantics debugger true to your material app, and then it will generate your app with all of these lovely boxes. You're free to use that if you find it helpful. For me, our application is too complicated. There's too many nested things. I want to see the UI as a sighted user is going to see it and debug it differently, and so I'm going to show you how to do that. DevTools in Chrome gives you the ability to do that. Right out of the gate, you don't have it though. You need to tell it that you care. So DevTools, with the Elements tab selected, you'll see that you're going to get the DOM. This is the document object model. This is basically all the HTML elements that Flutter has rendered for you. But Flutter also renders an accessibility tree, and that is what we're going to use to debug our accessibility. You just need to tell DevTools that you care about it. And you do that by selecting Enable Full Page Accessibility Tree down here, and then it's going to ask you to refresh DevTools. And when you do that, you're going to see this little guy in the top right of your DevTools, and this lets you toggle between the DOM, the document object model view, and the accessibility tree view. So we are now looking at the accessibility tree for my simple app, which has 2 text fields and a button. And you might notice there are a few things missing from the accessibility field because all we have is this button here that says enable accessibility. And that is because Flutter built this to be opt-in. There's a problem with that though. They're expecting screen readers and only screen readers to come in, hear that there's a button, and then double tap to activate. And when they do that, it then renders the accessibility tree. The problem is that not all screen readers are finding the button. So, and you've got multiple browsers to support, multiple operating systems to support. So there's a lot of combinations that you can have. You've got screen readers on phones, you've got them on desktops, and then multiple browsers. Like, it just expands. And unfortunately, some of those screen readers are on the struggle bus. So you can't count on a screen reader seeing this button to enable accessibility. The way that you programmatically enable the accessibility tree is with this call right here. You can throw it in right after run app, widgets flutter binding .ensure initialized .ensure semantics. Now, the problem with this is that it turns it on for everybody all the time. And there are some performance implications that come with it. We have not had too much trouble because we're not a super UI heavy with animations and stuff like that. But apparently the frames per second are struggling a little bit when ensure semantics is turned on. So that's something to be aware of because it impacts everybody, not just people who are. In fact, it's not going to impact the screen readers at all because they're not looking at your page. This is going to be what trips us up down the road. So remember ensure semantics. You're going to need to remember you have it turned on when you're testing to make sure that it's not the thing that's causing the weird buggy thing that you are definitely going to see at some point. Okay, so we have turned ensure semantics on, and now you can see our accessibility tree has 3 nodes in it, 2 text boxes and a button, just what you would expect. This is Flutter out of the box. I didn't add a semantics widget to anything. It's generated for you just like this. So oftentimes you don't need to do very much. Down here, you can see that we have some ARIA attributes. ARIA stands for Accessible Rich Internet Application. It's basically a spec. It's a set of roles and attributes that make the web more accessible. There's a ton of information out there. We could do an entire talk on ARIA. You don't have to worry about it too much because when you create a semantics widget and add the properties, that's what's basically getting translated into ARIA roles and attributes. And that's what tells the screen reader, oh, this is a button. I need to make sure that the user knows that this is a button, which is why you don't need to use the word button in any of your semantic labels because the screen reader already knows it if the semantics is set up properly. There's not a one-to-one support level for this, so you might, in the documentation for ARIA, you'll see there's a lot more than what I've listed here than the properties that are on the semantic widget, so you do need to check and make sure that what you're looking for is available in semantic widget. It might not be, don't expect it to be. The other thing to note about ARIA is, and the semantics property in general, is you don't want to overload the widget with too much information because everything that you put in there gets read to the user. And if you were in Manuela's talk yesterday, you heard how quickly users go through and try to get the information that they want. They're skipping stuff all the time. So you want to put the minimum amount of information necessary in your label or semantics widget and then test it, listen to it yourself and make sure that we're not repeating words. It's giving them the idea of what this widget is supposed to do and what it means. This is just an example of a random div in HTML and the use of ARIA. So a div is just it's like a container in HTML. And if you didn't have an ARIA role and you were wrapping a form in the div, the screen reader wouldn't know that. So that you can see how this is giving context to the screen reader. It's a form and it's contact information, and that's all the person needs to know about the next set of items that that's about to get read to them. Okay, quick tips. So you're going to come across this media query property, accessible navigation, when you look at the docs, and this works great most of the time, is my understanding, in everything but the web. But the web is run on the browser, which is sandboxed from operating systems, and so it's not that clear whether somebody is using a screen reader or not. And to add to that, we've just turned Ensure Semantics on for everybody, right? Everybody's getting it, and accessible navigation property is reading whether Ensure Semantics is on. So if you just turned it on, and you're building for the web and trying to use accessible navigation, it's going to tell you every time that accessible navigation is on, which essentially makes it worthless. In the web, we have window titles. So this little guy up here in the tab, that's your window title. It's the first thing the screen reader is going to read. It's getting this information from, if you've set title in your material app, that's what it's going to be. But you can also override it if you're using things like page views in your Flutter application and you want that title to change as somebody moves through the application. You can wrap anything in a title widget. I have no idea why it requires a color, but throw a color in there and then the title that you choose. And if you have multiple titles, from my testing, it looks as if the lower down the widget tree the title is, that's the one that's going to win. So you've got material app at the top of your widget tree, and then if you've got a page view nested deeper down, that title is going to win, and that's what's going to show up at the top of the browser window up here. Animated opacity is another little helpful widget to know about. It has an always include semantics attribute that you might find helpful. It's important to know that if something isn't visible on the screen, it's not going to be viewed in the accessibility tree, which means the screen reader isn't going to read it. So if you have something that animates the opacity, goes from 0 to 1 later on, something happens, errors show up, whatever, the user might not necessarily know it because they might have progressed past that point in the accessibility tree. And so they're never going to hear about it. So if you want it to always be visible, you have the option to do that here. If you don't, if you really want to alert the user that something else has happened and they need to be aware of it, you can use semantic service.announce. At any time, you can you're basically programmatically telling the screen reader, hey, read this information to the user. So this is what we do. Our application is very form heavy, and people are progressing through a form on multiple pages. And let's say they've finished a portion of the page, they progress, and there's errors. Those errors exist on form fields that are up the accessibility tree. So we tell them, hey, there's errors on the page, please go back and revisit. Okay, this is the fun part. Or not, depends on how you view it. All right, the first issue that I ran into, and actually, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back because I forgot. Actually, I wanted to show you one other thing. With the accessibility tree, oh look, I didn't turn it on for this guy. Let me do that real quick. You can see how it works. See, it's telling me to reload DevTools. Now I can come over here, I can see my accessibility tree. Just like with the DOM, you can highlight items in the tree. And it will also change, it'll show you what has been focused and stuff like that. Okay. Now, first challenge I ran into right out of the gate was a dialog bug. We have a login flow that operates in a dialog. This is a super simple, basic show dialog. I didn't do anything fancy. And what was happening was I realized kind of offhand, like what is happening? It was closing prematurely. I couldn't figure out what was going on, and I realized I was clicking outside of the text fields. I'll show you in the demo real quick. So, I mean, this is nothing fancy. I was popping the dialogue and clicking down here or something, like just barely missing the text field. Anybody could do it, right? Apparently my tap targets aren't big enough. And it was closing. And this is a flow that we've had forever, and I've never seen an issue with it. And it took me a while to realize that it had something to do with turning ensure semantics on. Here comes the ghost of ensure semantics haunting me. And we spent a bunch of time, a bunch of trial and error trying to figure out what was happening. We tried throwing container in with like a solid background, different colors, tried to do a stack with a background in there because we assumed something was happening with the click event bubbling up and the dismissible area catching that click event. So we were trying to figure out how to block it. What ensure semantics had to do with that, I'm unclear. There is some fundamental thing that is happening with the rendering when that is turned on that is affecting things like this, like click events. So we did a bunch of trial and error, and actually my colleague Danielle, who's here today, helped figure out this hack for this. And there is a, I'm sorry, I need to look at the code. There is a bug filed for this, and they're looking into it. But you will see I had a dialogue example, and I have one with the hack. The fix. Okay, so here's the regular one, super simple. Here's the content, it's a padding, column, text field, text field. Here's the same thing with the fix. We put it in a stack. First element is position.fill, and here's the kicker. You have to put a semantics widget inside of the position.fill with hidden true. So there's something that's going on with this tree that is telling it, hey, there's a semantic widget here. It doesn't mean anything. It's hidden, but go ahead and absorb my clicks. I don't know. I can't explain it, folks. So there's your workaround if you run into this situation. I wish I had more answers, but you can see here, I'm clicking. You have to trust that I'm clicking, but now it won't close. The other solution is that you can just make the barrier dismissible. You can make it false, and then it won't be paying attention, but we wanted it to be dismissible. Like that wasn't a solution for us. Okay. That's the dialog bug. The next one is the drop-down menu bug. So this is a standard Flutter widget. You probably have seen it in forms with a drop-down. I'll just show you how it loses its mind. Okay, it's this guy right here. I'm tapping on the arrow. It's not working. It automatically selected gray. I didn't tell it to select gray. I can select pink. And now it's like just really all over the place. It doesn't know what it's doing. This guy just fails with ensure semantics turned on. I will also show you that this is where the tree comes in. This is a really good example of if you want to see what's going on with the widget, go look at the tree. This is my drop-down menu. It's showing as a text box. And then you can see these are the options that come with my drop-down. But I haven't activated it. I haven't told it I want to know what the options are. So if you're just traversing this with a screen reader, you're hearing that there's a text box, and then you're hearing gray, orange, green. Literally. It's not telling you their options. It's not telling you anything. It's not telling you can select them. So you can see this widget just it's not suitable for semantics. Also, there's a button here that says nothing, like no label. No, all this is going to say to the users, hey, there's a button. Double tap to activate. Okay, why would I don't know what it's doing. What am I supposed to do with that? So don't use that. Use drop-down button. Another material widget. This guy. I put two of them in here because this is the default view. Pretty simple. And if you need your drop-down to look more like the menu style, you can do it. I got it pretty close here, and if you needed a floating label, you could just do that with a stack. This guy is much happier. Check out what happens when I click on it. I get a dialog. Suddenly I have context. It asked me, it was seen as a button. So it's saying button, and it says open navigation menu. Okay, and I probably, for this demo, should have changed that to open color menu, but I didn't. And then it says dialog, pop-up menu. Okay, and then you get all of your options that you can click on, and these are all seen as buttons. So it's a much better experience for the screen reader to use the drop-down button rather than the drop-down menu. I'm going to give you a QR code for these slides, but the ones that have issues, I've put them at the bottom. If y'all have an extra 5 minutes, go thumbs them up, please. All right, this is a concept that's really important to understand. Accessibility focus does not equal keyboard focus, and it needs to, and it's a bug, and they're working on it actively. This can get really confusing. So the black box is showing you where the accessibility focus is. So that's what the screen reader is reading. And then you can see my drop-down menu. It's purple, it's got the cursor. This is where the keyboard focus is. And where we're running into issues is that we have a list of multiple text fields. And if they get out of sync, then I've got the screen reader telling me the label for one text field, and my keyboard is in another. So the keyboard focus is in another text field. So I'm hearing, enter color, and I'm on, the state I live in field, and I start typing, and it doesn't jive anymore. So this is problematic, and I have not found a fix for this. And part of the reason that makes it difficult is that you can't control accessibility focus. The accessibility focus moves up and down this tree in a vertical direction. You can either go forward or you can go backwards. You cannot jump around. And the reason for that is that if you can't see, if you're just listening, you have no context for where you are. And so if we were able programmatically as developers to say, hey, I want to take the focus from here and drop it 5 nodes down, the listener doesn't have the ability to know what you just skipped for them, right? So you have to go either up or down one element at a time. That's the only way that it works. It works that way on the phone. It works that way in desktop. So we can't control where accessibility focus is. We can control where keyboard focus is. They need to match. They need to follow each other. So Flutter team's working on it. That's definitely a big one. And if you see it, now you'll be aware of what's going on. Okay, this one has a lot of people up in arms. The text field, the basic material text field, if you include error text in the input decoration, and you're on a phone or a touch device with a virtual keyboard, this is specific to the virtual keyboard, you might see something like this when you're trying to focus between the two fields. The virtual keyboard comes up and goes down. So this is because ensure semantics is on. You turn ensure semantics off and it works fine. So this is going to affect anybody who's visiting your website on a phone. You can't enter anything. If the keyboard disappears, you cannot get it back. It just comes up, goes down, comes up, goes down. There's another issue that I just found last week, I think, related to the text field. If you have a text field in a list view, in a scaffold, that also has an app bar, doesn't matter whether it has an error text, it does the same thing. There's so many weird, buggy things about this. I think in this case, it has to do with some calculations going on about where to scroll the text field, because the app bar has a height, and when you bring the virtual keyboard up, it's trying to calculate where to put the input. That's my guess. I don't know. I just filed that bug, but it's doing the same thing. All right, so like I said, I don't have all the solutions, but I did learn a lot, and I hope that at least after today's talk, you won't be surprised by some of the things you will probably encounter. I'm sure there are more. You've seen the kinds of weird, buggy things that I've run into. I know there's more out there. Please file bugs. Consider accessibility as you build. A lot of these things were discovered after we'd already built the application. We'd already made decisions on what widgets to use, like that drop-down menu. And then I had to go back and figure out how to use the drop-down button. So if you're looking at these things and testing these things as you go, you can avoid some of the pain points. Test widgets with ensure semantics on before committing. Make sure you're testing on touch devices and with the keyboard and mouse, with and without the screen reader turned on. This is the web, folks. You've got all of these different parameters that you're going to have to test for. Variables, I should say. And then one of the things that I did other than, trial and error, of course you Google, you look on Stack Overflow. I couldn't find anything relevant on Stack Overflow. I think this stuff is too new. Where I found the most help was on GitHub, and not just looking at open issues, but looking at closed issues and reading through the comments and the discussion between the Flutter team and whoever's reporting. You can learn a lot that way. You can find workarounds and hacks while they're working on a more permanent solution, so definitely look at that. And I leave you with Tweedledee and Tweedledum. If it looks accessible, it might be, and if it might be, it probably is. Unless it isn't. So test. Thank you. I've got the demo app up, QR code, slide deck also. Go thumbs up those issues. I'll be updating the README in the repo also to have all the GitHub issues in there. I realize not everybody wants to go out to two places, but the slides were built with Flutter Deck. The Alice in Wonderland images were generated with ChatGPT. I take 0 credit.